I don't know if I'll get up today. I don't know if I'll give one single today. My whole outlook is sunken gray, and I have no idea why I woke up this way. Got my phone in my right hand, my books on the nightstand. If I unlock and I app pop, I'm stuck there, I'm a dead man. So Lord, give me the strength to please read one page. If it works in any way, I'll move on to the next thing, oh dear. I got my socks on, I'm coming up.
Welcome to Positively Undefeated. This is a podcast that talks about the day-to-day struggle ordinary people have over their demons and how each day they remain positively undefeated. We share ideas and ways that you can empower yourself to remain strong so that you can embrace the journey of living.
Well, Glenn, man, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'm Burl. It's nice to meet you. I heard a lot about you.
Okay.
So thank you so much. Really, you have any questions before we start?
Nah, man. I'm just gonna be myself.
Yeah, me too. Really, man, it's great that I don't know you that well. So this is a great opportunity for me to get to know you. And then, it's really my goal is for it to just be a conversation and just, partly getting to know you and all that stuff. So if you're good, man, we'll start.
Okay, let me the glasses on so I can see. Is this ring light bothering you?
No, you're good.
Can you still see me? Or should I put it back
better
on?
there? Yeah, I like it there.
You like it better there? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what we'll go with.
Thank you guys. Yeah, thank you. Hey, thank you guys for listening to Positively Undefeated. I'm Burl, your host. I want to remind you guys to go to your favorite podcasting app, which could be Apple, it could be Spotify, it could be Google Podcasts. There's several out there. But anyway, like and follow and review our podcast. That really helps us get the message out. Also, go to our website, which is evenoneLess.com. It's a great way to find some resources. It's a great way to connect with us. We have apparel for sale to help with the cause, all those things. So check out our website, evenoneLess.com. I'm here today with Glenn Gatlin. How are you, brother?
Oh, man, I'm great. Great. Excellent, man. I appreciate this opportunity. You have no idea. Hopefully by the end of this conversation, you'll understand why I'm definitely grateful for this, man.
Yeah. In fact, you live in Lawton. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Live in Lawton.
I always got to bring this up. I think that people that live in Oklahoma, they don't realize how big Lawton is. I think when you add Fort Sill, that Army base to Lawton, I think it's the third largest town in Oklahoma. And I don't think it gets any credit for that at all.
No. And that's because it's so much land. And I actually had to get accustomed to that. I'm originally from Virginia. And I've been out 20 plus years now. My wife is from here. The usual story of Army brought me here. You become one of those ones that's saying, I'm going back home. And then, you get married, you kind of see the gems of Lawton and you end up staying. So that's what happened to me. But it's because of the land. It's because of the land, bro. Like, it's so big with the land. And as far as the city part of it, it may seem small, and the mentality may seem small, but man, it's so much land out here.
Yeah, there really is. A lot of people, I've owned and operated like a gas trans. So I had people come from all over the country. And one thing I was surprised by when I started talking to people is that they're not used to like private owners owning so much land. So
Right.
A lot of they're from the government may own, or the state may own a lot of the land. And so it's for them, it's really mind blowing that, hey, wow, you have this much land. And to me, it's not that much, but I think you're right. Like it's different, a little bit different in Oklahoma. So, man, I wanted to ask you, you have an organization, it's called About Understanding. Do you mind telling me a little bit about that organization and what you guys do?
Yeah. So it's all about understanding. And first and foremost, the skeleton of it is we're a nonprofit organization and we teach social and emotional life skills to age group 12 to 25. Okay. And I always social and emotional life skills is because our purpose was to bridge the gap between classroom, traditional classroom settings and real life situations, meaning that no disrespect to the school system, but that social emotional life skills is lacking. Self-awareness, controlling your emotions, decision making, communication, being able to communicate no matter what type of emotion you're dealing with. And the reason why it's lacking is because I'm about to be 49 in a couple of weeks, right? So me growing up, and then what I see with my kids growing up, and then what I see now is when you say life skills, we automatically go to financial literacy, or we may go to household management, or we may go to now going more into teaching people about a trade. But the issue, challenge is that there are so many of us, and it includes everybody. We're one negative decision away from what's in our bank account will mean nothing to us, right? So we go back to the fundamentals, and we teach that self-awareness. We teach that, the things I just talked about as far as social emotional development. And we do it, we focus on the youth, but we also have developed a small business called Understood that does it for adults, so we can bridge that generation. So that's the skeleton of All About Understanding. But everything comes from the heart. I have a personal story with my daughter. I have 3 daughters, 23, 20, and 9 years old. And my 9 is my oops blessing, is our 9-year-old, right? So with the 23-year-old, she went through that challenge all the way from 6th grade to a junior in high school of being bullied to the point where she did attempt suicide. And thankfully, thank God that, it was just more of a cry for help. And bear with me, because the reason why I'm going that route is when she went through that stage, she was crying out for help for somebody to just listen to her. As a parent, right, when she was going through that, because I grew up with a temper, lacking that ability to control my emotions, always fighting, I'm trying to tell her the peaceful route. I'm trying to tell her to, let's turn the other cheek. Well, self-defense, yes, but let's figure out a different way. My wife was saying, no, let's do what you need to do. So as parents, we were trying to coach her and teach her the way we were seeing it, instead of really meeting her where she was at and respecting that she may be able to handle what I thought I couldn't handle, and just giving her the tools by listening. Now, when you get to the school system, they were addressing the bullying part. So once again, they're not listening to her. They're saying, hey, who's the bullies? Let's figure that out. Now, when we get to the community, when by the time we get the community looking for help, now they want to diagnose her with a mental health disorder because of how long it took for us to get help. The bottom line is, when we were going through that, I had to, number one, check myself and become more aware of myself. Not only that, but accepting the things that I discovered about myself. That way, if I can take care of myself, then I can take care of her and meet her where she's at, right? So social emotional development is more of a prevention before you get to the mental health part. And if I had increased my social emotional skills, I could have helped her increase her social emotional skills. And then who knows, we may have been able to prevent some of the things, or we may have been able to, even if we didn't prevent it, at least help her navigate through that journey a little bit more successfully.
Yeah. I want to ask you, that reminds me of something that I've been talking about lately, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. Well, take me, for example. I had, a lot of stuff happen when I was younger, and, some of the stuff you're talking about with your daughter, bullying, and, I had a rough childhood with my parents and all those things. And what I realized recently, the last few years, is that like I was emotionally stuck like a 12-year-old. Even though I'm 51 years old, I look back and I realized that the moment that I started like not really dealing with stuff, maybe coping through, in my case, I coped through alcohol. I coped through women. I coped through, all these other things.
Right.
And when I really stopped that and looked at it, I realized that I had the emotional maturity of like a 12-year-old. Even though I was an adult, even though, in fact, looking back on it, also, I was pretending to be an adult, pretending emotionally to be, and, and really whenever I was researching that and just looking at it and trying to understand it more, I think that whether you're talking about trauma or whether you're talking about addiction, that, and it, maybe it doesn't even go there. Maybe it's just depending upon other people.
Right.
That all of a sudden it seems like at that point when you quit cope or you're not coping with it healthy, that you stop growing emotionally. And
Right.
I'm curious your thoughts on that, whether you agree or disagree, or you have some thoughts on that.
No, I do. I do agree. I agree. We stop growing emotionally, but with that, once again, I don't know if we stop growing emotionally, right?
Mm,
We're just growing in the wrong direction, or maybe we have slowed down our process because, like you said, once we get to the point where we decided on utilizing something else to cope with, we're still growing. We just
mm,
grew that direction. And then, so the emotionally, as far as being stuck as a 12-year-old, I can understand what you're saying because now every way that you learn on how to cope, whether negative or positive, is learned behavior, right?
yeah. Right.
So now when we're talking about learned behavior, being stuck emotionally at 12, well, this is what you learned. You stuck there. Now everything as you grow, what you see, the alcohol, the women, you saw that, right?
Mm,
Saw that before it happened. I'm assuming you saw that before it happened. So same thing with me. Uh, even and it's funny you said that when I went through what I went through with my daughter and then had to start reflecting back on my life, I was when I tell the youth that it's like a trip, they're so, some of them don't even believe me, but I was addicted to weed. And I'm talking about major addiction to weed. And that's how, I don't know, lack of a better term, dealt with it. Cope. I try not to use the coping word. I try to say deal, even though it's the same thing. Firm believer of changing the verbiage, you can change your perception, right?
right.
So I chose weed. I chose weed for a long time. And now, was I stuck with the 12-year-old mindset? I didn't grow up around weed. I learned that after I went to college, and when I saw that, okay, let me deal with my emotions and deal with what I'm going through with that after I experimented. Does that make
Mm,
sense?
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I wasn't using weed to cope with anything when I started it. I
Yeah.
started it, but then as I go through my life and anything that was considered tragedy and trauma growing up, when I
Mm,
say up from 18 on all the way to I would say 30, 38, you
mm,
know, weed was it. Weed was my deal. So did I stop growing emotionally at a certain age? No.
mm,
But did I go in the wrong direction? Did I slow down my process? And once again, that's the lack of accepting what we go through. We acknowledge it. It's easy to discover. Everyday life, we discover something about ourselves. But whether we accept it or not makes a difference on that decision that we make and then how quick or slow we grow, if that makes sense.
yeah, absolutely. So when you were dealing with your daughter and her, what she had going on, um, lots of parents deal with that. My wife really dealt with that with her youngest daughter. And, really, I think that for a lot of people, that's the first time that they've had to deal with a situation like that, especially when you're talking about your kid's talking about committing suicide, and it's overwhelming and you're really not sure where to turn to for help. And, and I think that part of what I've seen is that parents have a tendency to kind of blow it off because, they feel like, well, she's just saying these things. She doesn't really mean it. And I think even when we're talking about ourselves, we may have these suicidal thoughts or we may have these depressive thoughts, but kind of like our excuse is, oh, it's not that big a deal. It's not, it's not a problem. It'll be okay. I can, maybe it's embarrassment or a stigma. I'm curious, what did you learn from, like, if parents are listening and maybe they're dealing with the same thing with their child, what advice could you give maybe a parent that's struggling, trying to figure out what in the world to do?
Yeah, man. Three things. First of all, listen,
Yeah.
right? Listen with empathy to understand that, and it is challenging, but if you listen with empathy to understand that your child is still a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we do make that mistake. We blur the lines of this is my child, but if somebody randomly came off the street, or even if it was a best friend and they told you this, then you're more likely to sit and listen to them. But when it's our child, we have a mental block of, because we instantly want to protect. We go into protection mode. Protection mode means, what do I need to do to help? So now if I'm focusing on myself, I'm not listening to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
number one is listen with empathy. Number two is acceptance. We're going to continue to say that all throughout this conversation, is accepting what they are telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, for me, when I listened to what she was telling me, or when I saw the signs, there'd be little notes in her bathroom cabinet, and I finally figured out, or there'd be things that she was doing, at school that was uncharacteristic. I thought it was uncharacteristic. I wasn't accepting it. Now, because I didn't accept what she was going through, well, I should say this: I didn't accept what she was going through because I did not accept what I was going through as far as how I was dealing with it as a parent, right?
Right.
Like, I have to figure this out because I don't want this feeling anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we have to accept. And the third thing, the most important thing, and I always apologize, and we laugh about it now to my kids, but we have to respect that they may have the ability to handle their situation with some guidance better than we either handled it or how we're handling it at that point.
Wow. That's pretty powerful when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because that kind of, you put some trust into your kid, and maybe, part of it's helping them, I guess, grow and mature themselves, but wow, you're talking about, it's like a paradox things where now you're trusting, the kid that you brought up. So that's pretty powerful.
But see, here's the deal, because everything goes back to another thing that I've learned. Everything goes back to, I can't take care of them unless I take care of myself, right? So now, if I trust that, if I put that trust into my child, and I take the time to really reflect on that, now I'm going back to trusting our ability as parents that we did do something right raising them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Now, I was going to say, the first one you talk about is communication. And I'd say in the last 6 months, I've had, my youngest child is 21. He's 21. He turns 21 today. Today's his birthday. Happy birthday, Tyler.
Birthday.
Anyway, but I noticed something, he's not a big talker. So, and he's working in the oil field. He's busy. He's kind of moved out on his own now. And I noticed something, like we'd have a hard time maybe when we talk on the phone. It just seemed like there's lull there. And so I realized that I had this tendency to fill the void, like jibber jabber talk. And I'm not a big talker either,
Right.
So you have two guys that are probably alike, and they don't really, they don't talk a lot. And one day I realized, I don't know what made me do this, but maybe it was God put it in my heart. I don't know what it was, but all of a sudden, like, I just got this in my spirit that I needed to just stop and just wait out the uncomfortable silence. So what I did was I just waited it out, and it felt, incredibly uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden he started talking about something. And then I'm like telling this, he's telling something that happened at work or whatever. And he's like, and I'm like, wow. So I feel like I'm like, connecting with them. And then when the lull happened again, what I did was I just paused until it was uncomfortable. Like we're just sitting there on the phone in silence. And then here he goes again. And he's bringing up another subject. And so, I was telling my wife about this is like, this is pretty amazing because what I learned from that situation, especially with him, don't try to fill the space, with conversation because it feels uncomfortable. Because a part of me is like, I want to talk to my son. I want to spend time with him. Of course, I like him, I want to. But then also what I realized what I was doing was I was filling it with this unnecessary verbiage, but it was keeping him from saying what he wanted to say. And as I backed off and I keep saying that till it was uncomfortable because it was like really uncomfortable. And then almost on cue, he started talking about something that he wanted to talk about. And I was blown away by that, and I think that it just made me realize that sometimes that we have to just wait and see what they want to talk about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ever
And you could,
experienced anything like that?
yeah, well, yeah, because now you can build on it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's what was interesting. What you said was that, you don't like to talk, but yet you host a podcast, right?
Yeah.
So, so it's like, but you love to talk. We love to talk about the things that are about us. I don't mean like that selfish way. I'm talking about our gift. What's a part of us, right?
Right.
So that awkward moment is okay. They're waiting to see if you really want to hear what's going on in their life. Generation gap. They may not think that you want to hear, but like you said, as soon as you broke that awkwardness, and now you're listening to them, and they feel like we're listening to them. Then they just build on that. So now you have less silence because if you just take a mental note, well, how did that go? Or whatever they were talking about, like, how did you work through that? Or what's going on out there in the field? Whatever they want to talk about. So, no, it's great, man. It's great to see that.
Well, on your last point, the last point that you made, it also was reminding me, I was probably like a year ago, same son, he was, he wanted to go to the military. That was his big deal. I was in the army. You were in the military. So really, since as long as I can remember, this kid wanted to go to the military,
Right.
I mean, doing all kinds of things to prepare. He'd work out and all these things. Well, when it got down to it, he failed the hearing test. All of a sudden he found out that he had, hearing loss. And so he tried multiple ways, multiple times. And so it was just crazy devastating for him, and I just, I felt for him as his father because I knew that this was important to him. And I remember I was walking, I live out in the country, and I was just praying to God about that situation. And I was really at the time, I think I was praying that, God would find a way to let him in the military is really what it came down to, I think. And,
Right.
and all of a sudden it's like God laid it on my heart. He said, who cares about Tyler more than I do? Who cares more? Me, God, or you, Dad?
Right.
And I had to sit there and think about it a minute. And I'm
Right.
like, and it really kind of blew my mind too, because I'm like, of course God cares about him more than I do. But
Yeah.
just didn't feel like that at the moment, right? And so
Right.
then, like when that like epiphany that came onto my mind, it's like, wait a minute, God cares about. Then I'm like, it was like I realized at that moment I've got to leave this in God's hands. He knows what he's doing, and yes, he's going to go through some pain, and just like we did, and all those. But also, God was reminding me, I'm in control. I got this thing, and it's still hard to let that go sometimes. When I'm starting to worry about it as a father. I don't know if I've ever experienced anything like that, but
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. What happened with me is when I got when that light bulb came on for me, it was once again I kind of selfishly went back to When I had that breakdown with me, full disclosure, I locked myself in the bathroom. So I used to work at Goodyear, right? Before I made that transition to what I do now. And I was working at Goodyear during that time that my family and I went through what we're talking about with my oldest one. London is her name. So, yeah, London, I said your name. Sorry. But yeah, so when I was going through that moment and it was hard for me to let go, right? What God did for me is he put that pressure on me to look for help, meaning that when I thought I was doing everything I could, I'm working at Goodyear, we're making this money, benefits, everybody's good, but I'm miserable, right? And so not only can I handle what was going on at home, there were times when I get off a 12-hour shift and it took me 2 hours to go home because I'm trying to erase what happened throughout that day, but also prepare me for what I'm about to go through in the household, which was unpredictable. And you want to bring that good spirit, but then you also want to, the first thing your family's going to ask you at the dinner table is, how was your day? They're going to see it right, going to read right through me that my day was miserable, but do I want to bring that misery on to the elephant in the room that we're already going through things? And, long story short, I broke down because I was like, the weight is overbearing. The weight of me being a father, a husband was overbearing, right? So now it's like God said, I locked myself in the bathroom. I got the bathroom and then I got the little miniature bathroom with just the toilet. And I locked myself in. I had that breakdown and God was like, okay, so the same way you have to trust that I'm taking care of your daughter and your family is the same way you have to trust that I'm taking care of you. Once that opened up, like I said, and I say selfishly, but I had to focus on me. And it gave me the opportunity to focus on me. It also gave me an excuse. Let's just keep it real. It gave me an excuse to say, okay, God, you got it. Right? You got it. Because I don't now I can't do both. I can't reroute my life and go back to the beginning and figure it out and go through that process and while still taking care of her. So I had to let that go, let God do that. Well, then once we get past all of that and I see God taking care of all of us, that's when like everything, all about understanding and, the family figured it out. And I quit Goodyear during COVID. First time Goodyear shut down since I can remember. I was there for 10 years. I quit Goodyear, just cold turkey out of faith. And I come home and 30 minutes later, my partner, who's my partner now, and my brother, he called me because he's working in the school system. He said, there's a job in the school system. When I came home, when I gave my letter of resignation, I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew what God had laid on my heart, but I had no idea what the plan was going to be. 30 minutes later, when I walked in the house and I was like, man, I took a deep breath. He called me. There's this job in the school system doing ISS, in-school suspension, which was along the lines of what we were trying to change in the school system. And then just everything, God showed me he was playing chess, right? We're playing checkers, but he was playing chess. And to your point, to answer your question, to make a long story longer, in order for me to really open my eyes to get away from this father protector role, I had to go to the father and the protector, let him protect all of us, and then figure out what my role is in that, right? He's the coach. He's the basketball coach. So do I play point guard or do I play center today? Whatever. So that's what kind of opened my eyes, just the pressure of me trying to do it on my own, but understanding I couldn't do it on my own when I had that breakdown. And that's what led me to what we're doing now.
I think that when you're talking about like the Goodyear, automatically I have a friend of mine who he's a lot younger than we are. He's in his he's early 30s now, but in his 20s he worked for Michelin in Ardmore, and now they closed that place down. But they he worked there. In fact, his wife worked there too, so they would work opposite shifts, and they did really good financially, meaning they paid off their house, they did all these things. But the whole time, he's talking to me like he just hates this job, hates it. And I guess kind of like maybe I fit into the little bit of the mentor role because I was a little bit older. But we related on so many ways, even though there was this age difference. And now he's quit the Michelin thing, but I still see him struggling like with this balance between money, making money, because he made really good money, and then like the passion of what he wants to do, and it's like I hear that a lot. A lot. In fact, a lot of times I can relate to it. It's like you would think by my age I'd have it all figured out, and this is what I want to do, and but I know a lot of guys struggle with that, and they struggle with this balance between money and really doing the passionate stuff they want to do. And sometimes my answer is I feel like that they also go through a season. I mean, when your kids are younger and you're having to, I think that may be a different mentality than when your kids get a little bit older. I see that too. What would you give him advice if he's sitting here struggling, like what, again, he's out of Michelin now, but yet he actually took a job that still pays well, but he kind of hates it. And so, I think you, me, him, we're not the first to deal with this.
Yeah. Yeah. God gave me a quote while I was working at Goodyear that helped me transition. Don't let wealth dictate your gift. Let your gift create your wealth. Right. We're talking about utilizing. So we have this thing with the hobby thing, right? We grew up with, when you have a hobby is what you love to do, but you're only doing it part-time. Right. So we got to get out that hobby mentality of understanding that whatever you love to do, you're going to put forth the work ethic to do it, because you got to work anyway. So if you got to work hard anyway, you might as well put the work ethic towards doing something that you love to do. Another advantage that anybody who go through that have now is, I tell people, whenever you discover let's back up. When you ask somebody what they love to do, for some people, it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing to spit out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they know it, because then you kind of help them out. Well, when you're doing it and when you're having fun, what are you doing when you're having fun, right? And some people don't want to spit it out because they minimize that. They may think, oh, it's not a big deal, or they may think it can't be successful, whatever. But when you encourage them and almost really hold them accountable for writing down what they love to do, then I tell them to type in Google 10 ways to be successful at ... whatever you love to do. And you will be amazed at what comes up, no matter what the subject matter is, on how you can be successful. Now, the hardest part is that financial gap between quitting, right, and maintaining. So now for your buddy, if you found a job that still pays, right, every day, depending on what he's doing, there's still, when I worked at Goodyear, working at the assembly line, building tires, I still found a way. I decided that what I had to do, I had to go back to school. Now that I know what I love to do, education was a lot more appealing to me, because I'm studying psychology. So while I'm still pushing buttons, on the machine, now I'm reading and I'm studying, because of the more that I'm doing what I love to do, and that gift, the more it energizes you. And then now what you're doing to make money becomes the hobby, right? And what you're working towards becomes your career. So I believe that is the first step of once again, accepting what you love to do, accepting your gift. That's your passion is always going to be aligned with what you love to do. Then you're going to find that purpose. Your purpose is going to be what you are called to do, what you have to do every day. And that's going to be aligned with your gift, which is going to correlate with what you love to do. Once you get through that, now you utilize the technology or the social network that you have to say, okay, well, you do that for a living, right? I talk for a living. I make money talking and helping people for a living. The same thing that I would do at the YMCA while we're playing basketball, except I'm doing it for free, right? Now I found a way to do what I love to do and get paid to do it. And then with the All About Understanding, even though that's a nonprofit and we don't get paid for that, that actually led me to the small business that I have to get paid doing what I love to do, but it's all serving somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yep.
that's
So what's the
kind of
small business that you do?
understood. So once again, I talked about the all about understanding. Well, understood is we prepared the youth with all about understanding for the world.
Mm-hmm.
We go in to talk to school systems and do humanity training. We go to different corporations and do humanity training, which is teaching people how to treat other people, the empathy, the understanding, the communication. Because now we're preparing another thing we're doing, we're preparing or closing that generational gap of we teach these kids how to get a job or whatever, going to wherever they love to do. But now the corporations don't know how to receive people, right? So we teach humanity training, we do life coaching, and I do motivational speaking, all in social emotional development. Because kind of like what we talked about earlier, no matter how old you are, you can be stuck, like you said, in that 12-year-old age emotionally. No matter how old we are, social emotional development is something that we got to remain conscious of, no matter how old we are. So not only do we help individuals that are adults, but now we, once again, Fort Sill, I go into Fort Sill we talk to holdovers that are in basic training that are mentally and emotionally can't handle the fact that their life has stopped with training. And like I said, school systems and parenting classes, though, all of those things, and a group home where they receive money to bring in people like us. Well, here we are. Not only do we help the transition program, we're helping those youth that are detained, but now we're also have the entity part of it were understood, where we are teaching the workers who may only be there just to get a paycheck. Well, might as well understand this person that you're dealing with. Same thing with teachers. Reality is that when you're a teacher, you may only be doing it for the paycheck. You may love kids, but you really may only be doing it for the paycheck. Or here being in military town, wife wanted to teach and it was an easy job to go get into. They're not really financially strapped for money, so they do this. But the reality is you are still dealing with human beings. So you might as well get some of this training, humanity training, to make your job easier as well as prepare to you. So that's a small business part of it.
I like it. It reminded me when you were talking earlier, a little bit earlier, is that I have a lot of people that will ask me about they want to start their own business, right? And I've owned several businesses, and I currently own several, and so I get that question a lot, and what I notice a lot in those questions or those conversations is I say they have the employee mentality. Like they want that paycheck every 2 weeks on Friday at this time. And they want that benefits and they want the health insurance and they want to be paid for a holiday, and I think those things are good. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But what I try to get them to understand is that you have basically an employee mentality, but you're wanting to be your own boss. And those don't match, it's like, and for a lot of people, that is a big transition. It's like to change. First of all, and it goes right along with what you're saying, is that you kind of have to change your mentality in first. And then once you change that mentality, then, that will help you tremendously to get where you're wanting to go with your business idea or whatever. But I see that all the time. I have a friend who's like super talented. He likes to weld and he's super talented, but he talks about, dreams about starting his own thing. He talks about it a lot, and he asks me sometimes, what do I need to do? And my answer is really always the same with him. It's like, man, you've got to change your mentality because you're thinking like an employee. And I understand it because that security is super important, especially when you're talking about your family and your kids. But I think that also there's a lot of, faith that's involved there. It's like if God's putting something on your heart and you're not doing what God's put on your heart, and you're frustrated, but you still have this old mentality that's not I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. That mentality word is huge. And man, I totally agree because, first step in changing your mentality, I believe, is, kind of ask them, how often do they go to human resources to see what they actually do? How often do they go, depending on their role, how often do they go to the head manager, lack of a better term, and kind of see what they do?
Mm-hmm.
How often do they research the insurance side of it? Everything that you take for granted as an employee because it's like automatic, right? Even payroll. Like how often do you research how you get paid? How does that money end up direct deposit? Those are the that we take for granted when we're employees, and we live this dream of, I mean, it's difficult. It used to be difficult for me to understand until I transitioned to there. But you want that dream of like you said, that security without doing the work. You're thinking that you're really not going to do a lot of work as the quote unquote boss. Do you really honestly realize how much work you are going to put in initially until you get your system down, until you got the right people beside you, I had to hire a business coach. And my business coach, and we happen to be such good friends now that it's like family. But without my business coach, I don't know if I would have had the mental capacity, the mentality to actually own a business, to be an entrepreneur, right? Because for me, I just want to talk. Let me go train the classes. Let me go talk, everything else that goes with that. I'm like, whoa. So like you said, the mentality, man, I totally agree. There's really nothing else I would say different other than that mentality. And how are you changing that mentality,
Yeah. I'm curious if you experience this. Well, whenever I think about Western technology, which is, and y'all, it's probably called something different in Lawton, but it's like, the offshoot of like the school program or whatever. So we have Western technology program here, which they teach stuff like the CNA course and truck driving school and welding. And, I think it's a great deal. So every year they bring me in and like, I teach this. Or usually, I'll either be on their employer panel or I'll be on like their leadership and talking about leadership. But one thing I try to always emphasize, it's like if when I'm around young people, like in high school, I'm like constantly reminded that they are in the greatest position in the world. So somebody once told me that, well, here's what their definition of wealth was. Their definition of wealth is in 1 month, if your passive income is more than your monthly expenses, then you're wealthy. So you think about it, a high school kid probably has no expenses, no debt. They don't own a home, a mortgage, a car payment. A lot of them, some of them may, but the point is most of them don't. So truthfully, they're in a better position than even their parents because they have the freedom. What for me, like what I realized when one time, at one point in my life, I started, when you were talking about it earlier, like people have a hard time like understanding their gift or understanding what their passion is. Of course they do. And like, but the same thing, what I realized with success, like if you ask somebody, give me your definition of success, a lot of times they can't explain that. They can't explain what they think I mean, even if you're talking about, Glenn, if you're talking about family, it's like, what's successful for your family? And, I think, especially when we're young, we think money will solve our problems. But for me, and I went through that where, I made a lot of money, and that was kind of my focus, work, make money. But then I realized it's like really for me, success was freedom.
Absolutely.
ability, like to stop in the middle of the day
Yeah.
and do a podcast with Glenn
Yeah.
and not have to ask for permission to do that.
Wow.
And I mean, seriously, right before I got on this podcast with you, I was out working on some land that we bought. So I'm out there doing stuff that, and it's not like I can always do what I want to do. I have to do certain things, of course. But I realized for me, success was freedom. If I could stop and go to my kid's ball game and, and be there. And so that started really change. That was a mentality change for me. But what I noticed with people that are like young people that are in high school, man, they're in the greatest position in the world. And they really have a ton of power because when you think about their parents who maybe, man, I've got to go to work or I can't pay my mortgage or I can't pay my car payment or, their parents a lot of times feel stuck. Mm-hmm. And yet this kid who's 16, 17, 18 years old is able to really, they have the freedom. And I don't think they realize there comes a lot of power with that, but also a lot of responsibility. You know, you see it. It's like people go to college and all the credit card companies, line up to give them a credit card. And what they're trying to do is, man, they're trying to get them under, in that rat race. And Absolutely. It's easy to get caught in that rat race. And it makes me excited when I talk to the youth to think, man, if you could understand you're in the best position possibly that you will ever be in right now.
Right.
And I want them to see that. And I'm talking about the positiveness of that, Yeah,
the ability of choice.
Yeah.
The one thing you said about success that that made me think is people have a hard time defining that for them because they're trying to answer the way society wants to hear or society's perception of success. They're trying to answer the way, right? And then, when society's perception of success, you're getting that from somebody who is already successful, but once again, their definition of success suited them. So when we're looking at it like that, it's so hard for people to, like you said, yours was family. Mine is similar to yours when you talk about freedom. It's controlling my time, right? Controlling my time, not the money. The money, look, the country prints money. Money's going to be there, right?
Right.
Controlling your time and once again, to be able to do what you're passionate about and fit it into your schedule while you are doing, the other things that puts the food on the table or whatever the case is. But yeah, the youth, man, it's so huge. The imagination that they can have, the creativity that they can have, the choices of right now of what they choose to do with their life, and we're not even going to go with responsibility. Let's not go there yet. Just the fact that you are able to say, I want to do that. I think I want to do that. No, let me do that. Let's research like that choice. Like you said, I agree with you. They have so much power right now. So much power right now. And I think the mistake that we make as society, the mistake that we make is we're still trying to control their power, right? We if they tell us that, for example, if there's a youth that tells me that he or she wants to watch TikTok all day, I'm saying, okay, you want to watch TikTok all day. What do you want to do with that? Like, why are you watching TikTok all day? What exactly are you looking at? Okay, well, why are you watching TikTok since you're just looking at random stuff? Why don't you look at how social media works? Why don't you look at how TikTok works? Why don't you look at find something about what you love to do, if that's what it is, right? And then start broadening your mind, because then you're going to figure out that maybe I don't want to watch TikTok all day, right? But we take that power away from them. I don't know how you grew up, but the best thing my father did for me is, because he retired Air Force. The best thing he did for me when I was going through my transition because I joined the military out of desperation, right? Now that I look back, the best thing he did for me is he never forced the military on me. Even when I was going through what I was going through, he'll bring it up, but he never forced it. He never said, "Hey, I need you to go to the military." Like military, he never forced that. He never tried to make that decision for me, right? And now, of course, years later, right? Now that I look back on it, that was one of the best things he did for me is he gave me that ability, even at 23, 24, he gave me that ability to make that choice. So you're absolutely right, man. The power that our youth have to make the choices that they can make with our guidance, right? To make sure it's legal, to make sure it's what it suits what their idea of success is. If we can help them navigate through that, right? Ask those questions. Do you want a family? Okay, you don't want a family? All right, check. Your idea of success is that you don't have a family, right? Keep it simple. That oh, you want to make money? Okay, well, that's your idea of success. How much money you want to make? Okay, we check that off, right? Or you want a car? Or you don't want a car? Okay, well, that's your idea of success is I don't want a car. Yeah.
It's funny because I bring this up because I need to go find out what book I read this in, but when I was my 20s, I read this book and it talked about writing down 100 dreams that you have, things you want. And it made it clear. I mean, you put down whatever. You want a new car? Put it down. And I remember doing this exercise. And when I got to 20, I couldn't think of anything. So then I'm making up stuff like, oh, I want a new car. I want to make, at that time, it's funny. I look back and I want to make 75,000. It becomes a lot more not as important, right? So I think two things I learned from that exercise and again, it had this huge impact on me because I still talk about it. But one is that, you start to realize kind of what's important and what's not, because to come up with 100 things is pretty difficult, right? And then it's because like 5 years later, I looked at this list because I put it on my computer and I looked at this list and I'm like, I'm already making more than 75,000. I'm already got a new car, whatever it was. Right. And so it was a great exercise for me because it made me think and it made me really dig. And interesting, I'm like watching one of your videos on Facebook and, it reminded me, for several months, I'd get up and walk every morning. And really that was like my prayer time and whatever. I would just talk and think and whatever. And one of the things, I was prompted to do by that was name 100 things I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
And so same thing, 20, I'm into 20, something like that. And I'm like, I'm naming them off. I get to around 20 and I can't think of another thing. And then what ends up popping in my head is the small things like I'm thankful that I'm able to walk this morning. I'm able to get around. I'm able to think and not, and then, it's very crazy, but also the beauty of my surroundings really started coming out. Like I would see a deer, going in the field. And I'm like, wow. And things that I probably wouldn't have even noticed, but that same exercise created me to find gratitude, and I, it's when I was kind of struggling, I had a guy that was kind of mentoring me. He was like, man, I want you to write a gratitude list and I want you to put it in your wallet. And anytime you start struggling, I want you to pull that out. I thought it was stupid, honestly. But at that moment, I'm like, I see the importance of it because I think it almost does the opposite of your goals, or maybe it does the same. But what it did for me is there's so many things in my life that I need to be grateful for and I should be grateful for that are so commonplace.
Yeah.
Don't even notice them.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I have a roof over my head. My mortgage is paid up. I'm not, I can get my truck and I can go and I don't have to worry about it breaking down. When I was younger, it's like constant, you know what I mean?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Also, I just wasn't even noticing those things. I wasn't
Yeah,
even, and going back to the goals, you know, you start to realize that, man, you can always push yourself to make more money and more money and more money and more money, more money. But what I've noticed in my life, when I went for like a dream or something that I really wanted to do, it, I, I found so much in that, even if it failed. I
yeah,
found so much in that. And, I'll be the first to tell you, like, man, I've done businesses that failed utterly.
yeah,
And then I did some that were successful. But the one thing is consistent when I look back on my life is anytime I went for money, it not in more ways than one turned into a failure. You know
absolutely.
what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like, man, this is a great idea. I'm going to go make some money and I'll be able to make all kinds of money. And then not only did it fail, but also there was no fulfillment in it. That it's
absolutely.
just like, man, I felt like I was what I hear from you about Goodyear and what I hear from my friend about Michelin. It's like, I was like on the assembly line filling,
Yeah,
but I'm trying to make money and it
yeah,
just never worked out. Never. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
And it's crazy because with me, to piggyback off of that, I did 10 years and I had a 5-year plan, but where I was fooled at and my misery and my frustration came because I personally didn't care about the money. Like I'm simple, right? I'm give me certain things and I'm good, but it was I have 3 daughters and a wife, and the vacation time and I do like to stay in a nice hotel when we go somewhere. There's certain things that I like, but a lot of that money there was making sure that my wife can decorate the house the way she wanted to. Like everything was about them.
Yeah.
So, that pressure is on you to make that money, but it was even worse for me because I'm like, I care about the money, but I don't care about the money, as much as wanting to provide it for them.
Mm.
So, even with the whole gratitude thing, and yeah, man, I make those videos outside now, or even the other two mental breakfasts that I just did. Everything was about gratitude and being grateful because it's hard for people who are going through that black hole to come up with something to be grateful for, right? But if you take the time to realize the fact that you even have another day and another opportunity to contemplate or struggle with the thought process of what you're grateful for means you have something to be grateful for, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And it just kind of breaks it down. It just makes you stop looking so far ahead and understand what is right here. When you go outside, when that sun is out, the energy you feel, the fact that you can walk and the breeze is blowing, right? And you can just think and process and pray and, meditate, whatever you do, whatever is your niche, that is a grateful experience, right?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
a great experience, and you just have to get back to what is making you, because the reality is we don't, and I just say I use myself as an example. I had a point where I did not appreciate having a roof over my head until a storm came and I had to go to the store and there was somebody outside dealing with a storm that didn't have a roof,
Mm.
right? I it wasn't until I saw somebody else's misery to appreciate those type of things.
Mhm.
So once again, reflection and just really focusing on my well-being and my peace of mind, because now I can go back and look at the simple things that affect me. Now that enhances my empathy that I have for other people who don't have a roof, don't have a car, they're walking 5-10 miles to get to their job. But then I respect the fact that they're walking 10 miles to get to their job because they may be grateful that they have 2 feet to walk to their job, right? It's just this. I don't know. Some people say it's weird, but it's just a way that we have to really focus on them small things, but don't minimize the small things, you know? Don't minimize the small things, man, because they're huge to not only yourself, and then you can appreciate how big it is for somebody else, right? Even that person that is without a home.
Mm-hmm.
They may be looking at their life and being thankful because they just had somebody that was also without a home, but now they just had a funeral, or they were part of the funeral. They just died, right? So now we got to keep chopping it down to even the, once again, lack of a better term, smallest of the smallest, to understand what actually can you be grateful for when you're trying to write down that list of 100, right?
Mm-hmm. I love it. I'm curious about your or your spiritual journey. For me, I grew up, one thing I'm very thankful for is that, I felt like God's always been in my life. It was really always important to me. I think if I had to describe to you what, maybe my upbringing when it comes to spiritual, we always went to church and all that, but it was a kind of a legalistic, kind of environment. And so I looked at God like, he's pretty authoritative. He's going to shoot you with lightning if you don't do it. And so at some point in there, there's a book out there that I read a long time ago, it's Disappointed with God. And I think that describes how I felt, like very disappointed with God. And so as I've gone through my journey, I think that at one point in my life, I really had this mentality. Yes, I believe God was real. Yes, I believed in him, but also I felt like either he didn't want to help me, or he didn't care, or he was too busy, or whatever those things were. I felt like that he would not help me, is how I felt. And then as I really started to grow, I think a little bit more spiritually, I started to see like a simpler version of God. And that simpler version of God really kind of changed my mentality. I struggle with things back then with like prayer. I'm like, well, God knows what I need, and he knows what I want, and knows what best for me, and he's in control anyway. So why do I got to say it? Really. And like, what helped me with that mentality, or the change in mentality there was, somebody told me one time, it's like, don't pray for yourself, pray for other people. And that helped change it. So I focus more on other people. But I just look at the spiritual journey that I had. And I think, I meet a lot of guys who, they have a very distorted view of who God is. And it's maybe because their upbringing or the church they went to. And, a lot of them, guys I don't know, say, I'll never step foot in a church again. I'll never go. And I'm curious what your spiritual journey has looked like, and your thoughts on the spiritual side of things.
Okay. So, first of all, yes, I believe in God, always have, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about the journey, yes, God was always in my life because it was introduced by my parents, reinforced by my grandparents, and all our family members. So I'm blessed to have it in my family, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when you start to transition, the part that I emphasize as far as my spiritual journey is to distinguish the difference of what other people were telling me about how I should worship God versus what I know now as far as my spiritual growth on how I worship God, right? Mm-hmm. Notice I changed the should to how I worship, because how I worship God now is he is my father. Mm-hmm. So just like our kids have a father and they're going to ask us for things to help themselves, I do ask God for help. I do ask God for certain things, but I also understand that if it's in his will and it's on my path, then he'll provide it. If it's not, it wasn't best for me. Same way I would do for my kids, right? I emphasize the spirituality part because one of the mistakes that I think my elders made was to define that me praying meant I had to get on my knees and have a certain routine, right? Versus versus if I'm driving in my car and it's time for me to cut the music off, then I can just talk to him like a casual conversation, right? So I think more of my spiritual journey was me understanding and distinguishing the difference on and it wasn't, I know it wasn't out of spite. It's just how my parents were brought up, or how my ancestors, or how anybody that I talked to were brought up, how you may have had to do certain things a certain way. Um, you know, but for me, it was the spiritual growth of looking at God as the person who I can talk to at any time, as the spiritual person I can talk to at any time, as the higher being that I can have a random conversation with, right? And then it made me look back. Yes, we're brought up to say that God knows everything, right? Well, if that's the case, then why are we talking to him like he doesn't know everything? How can we talk to him and say, I'm praying for Burl, but in my heart, I may be going through a health crisis and I want to pray for myself, but somebody told me don't pray for myself, pray for Burl. Well, God knows that you're fronting right now. God knows that you're not being real right now. So that type of thing I'm scared of. When you talk about the fear of the authority of God, that is what I fear, being fake with God, right? I fear that. I fear the blessing that I have to be able to do what I want to do. I fear him taking that away at any time if I don't intentionally go out every day to serve somebody else. If I don't post videos with the intentions of, even if it's just one person, maybe this encouraging words will help them, right? To deny having the invitation from Emily to do a podcast with you, I would fear saying no, understanding what, the opportunity to have a great conversation with a person like you based off of what I've seen, what I've listened to, and what Emily said. I would fear that was the wrong decision to make. And God is going to say, what are you doing? Like, I just gave you an opportunity to grow with somebody that is like-minded, and you're not going to take this opportunity. Okay, well, I'll take away your opportunities, right? Like, yeah, I fear. So that's the biggest thing as far as my spiritual journey, is distinguishing the difference in what I was told versus what I was told about how I should have a relationship with God versus what I feel.
Yeah, I love it. I appreciate that. Glenn, I want people to be able to reach out to you and be able to get more information from you and really find out, what your business, and then your not-for-profit also. What's the best way for people to reach out to you? And maybe they listen to our podcast today and they have a question, or they want, any of that. What's the best way?
Absolutely. So our social media is, of course, Facebook at All About Understanding, all one word, ALLABOUTUNDERSTANDING, at All About Understanding. Also at Understood LLC. You can DM on both of those. Our website, same thing, www.allaboutunderstanding.org. And then our website for Understood is www.theunderstoodlife.com. And then, of course, once you go on those platforms, you'll see our email address. But email address is Glenn Gatlin. That's Glenn with one N. Gatling with a G on the end. GATLING at allaboutunderstanding.org. And that's our platforms, whether it be TikTok, whether it be Instagram, whether it be Facebook, and then, of course, the websites.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I say this, that I would love for us to find ways to partner together for our nonprofit. I think that there is some opportunities there. So I just want you to put that in the back of your head. One of the things that I feel like is, my family started this not-for-profit because, my two cousins committed suicide, and then I've had multiple, people that are around me. My grandfather committed suicide. And so we started this organization, but we realized it's, our goal is not just to have people stop committing suicide. That would be great. But we're really going beyond that. And we're really looking at physical, and we're looking at mental, and we're looking at creative ways And I think a lot of those creative ways come through partnering with like-minded people. And so I want for us to be able to find ways to partner together. We have a lot of stuff going on. You have stuff going on, but I think that there's some powers and like-minded people working together. And, I want you to think about that and just, really pray about it and see if there's a way that you think that we can work together. The other thing is I want to extend, I'm working on a project here. As I explained, we just purchased some land here and we're working on a pretty big project here. And I would love if you, find time to come down. I would love for us to spend some time together. Maybe we can have lunch and really just meet face to face and be able to talk through those things and just see how we maybe can work together. If not, how we can support each other.
Absolutely.
That's what I want to do. Man, I consider you a friend and I hope that we can continue that. There's so much about you that interests me. I love, when I go back and listen to this, I know that I'm going to be like, yeah, that there's so much good stuff that you said. And I appreciate that very much, man. It's like, I know you have a heart for people and you have a heart for kids and man, I do too. And I think that, I don't believe in coincidences. I think that God put us together for a reason. And, I think that, he'll reveal kind of what that means. But I think as long as we're open-minded and we're willing to look. So I want to extend that invitation.
Yeah.
I'm going to email you because I think all I have is your email address, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to email you my phone number. And then that way you can, we can, start working together and just talk and just find ways to meet up.
Absolutely. No, I'm with you. 100% with you. I appreciate it. And yeah, absolutely. Let's go. I'm ready. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'll make if you can't come here, man, I'll make the trip over a lot. And I go there sometimes, so it'll be either way. We'll make it happen. Well, thank you guys for listening to our podcast, Glenn. I appreciate you so much. I loved hearing your words, and this will be out in a couple of weeks, and I'll send you a copy of it, and then that way you can do the same thing. I mean, we're trying to spread, your message, our message, and so sharing it, getting people to subscribe to the podcast. That's kind of one of our main ways of getting our message out there as well. And so if you will help share it and just let people know what we're trying to do as well.
Absolutely.
I hope you have a great day, my friend, and talk to you soon.
You too. Thank you, man. Have a good one.
You bet.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Positively Undefeated. If there was something in this show that resonated with you, please share the show with your community. Want this show delivered each Monday morning to your podcast app of choice, please subscribe or follow. And if you'd like to get a hold of Burl, please do so by going to burlstricker.com/contact.